Yes, join in with Kiss Me Kate here on BBC Two after we celebrate the herald of Christmas now with the rich history of carols from kings.
Once in royal David's city stood a lowly cattle shed, where a mother laid her baby.
Carols from Kings is beamed into millions of people's homes throughout the world every Christmas Eve. It all started 60 years ago, when a lone chorister took his first breath to sing Once in Royal David's City. This Christmas, another lone chorister will take the same breath to sing the same carol.
The magic of the Carols from Kings broadcasts is that for an enchanted hour and a half, the world seems to stop. And we're in the realm of Christmas where everything is perfect.
But what has gone on behind the scenes over the decades to create what for so many people is the start of Christmas?
So, good morning, everybody. Let's stand up first, shall we?
Every morning at 8:10, 17 young choristers are put through their paces by their director of music, Stephen Cleabury. They make up half of the world-famous choir of King's College, Cambridge, which dates back to the University College's foundation by Henry VI in the 15th century.
Good, and higher up. Lower down. Okay, good. I came to King's in 1982, and my main job is to recruit and train the choir for chapel services and the other activities that the choir undertakes. Good. We're very lucky in that we're able to attract into the choir young boys and choral scholars who have immense potential.
The boys all go to King's College School, a co-educational prep school attached to the college. They join the choir aged 8 and leave at 13.
Get away from me.
Action.
Hi, I'm Tim, I'm 12. I like being in the choir because it's fun to sing and I enjoy singing.
My name's Barney. I've been in the choir for 4 years and I'm 13 years old. My favourite sport is rugby, just because I find it really fun.
Hi, my name's Tom. I'm a chorister in my last year in King's. Well, my favourite thing would have to be food. Fish and chips, class. Yeah, that's about it.
The choristers sing daily services in the chapel alongside 14 choral scholars, undergraduates and postgraduates at King's College, Cambridge.
Whilst I study music, the range of subjects that people study in the choir is incredibly diverse. I mean, we have someone studying natural sciences, there's people who do philosophy and theology and history, old art history, yeah. So it's, although there are a lot of people who study music, I think it's about 50% do other subjects as well.
Sam's connection with King's dates back a long way, and he's unique amongst the current choir.
Well, I've been linked to King's for quite a long time, I suppose. I started off as a chorister, and then in the intervening periods where I left King's as a chorister and came back as a choral scholar, my 3 brothers became choristers. So in fact, I've been linked to King's and Christmas for about 12 years.
Once in royal David's city stood a lowly
When I hear the current soloist of Once and Royal having a go, it brings back really good memories of when I did it. And it's something that it's amazing, kind of just passing the baton on from year to year. But there's a great deal of respect, I think.
There are 2 weeks to go before the 2013 recording of Carols from Kings.
You can hear Stephen rehearsing the Once in All David City solo in the next room in the chapel. So that's always a magical moment.
You get them all to rehearse it.
The most exciting thing is the what's that called when the betting on it? It's not quite betting. What's it called?
It's
sweepstake.
The sweepstake.
The sweepstake.
We do a sweepstake.
And there's a prize of a bottle of champagne at the end. Which did you win it last year?
I won it in my first year. It's probably the most exciting thing about Christmas Eve when you realise you've won a bottle of champagne.
Yeah, I know.
Carols from Kings has always opened with a lone chorister. An honour granted only to the very best.
When you hear that Once in Royal David City on Christmas Eve, or you watch it on the TV, that's at the moment where you think, maybe there is something in this whole business of peace on earth and goodwill towards men. Maybe it's not such a bad idea. And for a moment, I think we're all transported to a world that we'd all love to be in. I was lucky. I did quite a lot of solos. Now, why, I don't know, but I did. I did the Once in Royal David City solo. Actually, I did it 3 times. I'm always amazed at how confident they are. I mean, it takes a tremendous amount of guts to do that. My mother, who died this year, aged 93, always used to listen to every year, and she'd say, oh, the chorister, he sang quite well, but he wasn't as good as you. She would always say that every year, and of course they're much better than I was.
As always, the soloist will be trained by the director of music.
The question of solo work is a difficult one for the director because obviously I want to give as many of the singers an opportunity to sing a solo as I can. But there's no doubt that some of them have more bottle than others, so inevitably you choose the ones that work well in those conditions. But you don't know whether they're going to work well until you ask them to do a solo. So through the year, I'm surreptitiously, in a way, assessing people, but just by giving turns to everybody.
The solo Once in Royal is usually a year 7 or 8, so I'm year 7 now. So there's a small chance I would get it, but it's very unlikely.
It's important in deciding to whom to allocate solos that you don't ask somebody to do one too early. Because if somebody does a solo before he's really ready to do it, it takes a lot to build up the confidence again after that. So the ideal thing is to give somebody quite a simple solo that he can do really well, and then you build on that confidence. And the journey that they make between when they first come in as a regular in year 6 and what they can do year 8 is sometimes spectacular.
No H, it's stoboju, not stoboju. Shriewa. Shriewa. Twojego.
Mr. Cleabury is trying to get the rehearsals so that the performance is perfect without any mistakes, although he's not always successful.
You don't make any mistakes though, Alex, do you?
Of course not. Never make mistakes.
Since its first televised broadcast in 1954, Carols from Kings has been a service consisting of carols, readings and poems. The worship is led by the Dean of the College.
I think it's important to remember that Carols from Kings is a service, not a concert. Of course we want people to enjoy the music, to enjoy the readings, to enjoy the occasion. But it is a service, and its first purpose, therefore, is worship of God. And everything, in a sense, is organised around that principle.
In determining the content of the programme, it's the words which lead. So the first process is the selection of readings. And it's at that point that I come in and select the music. And for me, it's very important that the music selected in some way or another reflects the words which have just been spoken.
The mixture of readings from the Bible and poetry is as important as the music in the carols from King's service.
Anywhere around here. Anywhere around here. Pretty good.
It's the chaplain, Richard Lloyd Morgan's job to audition the readers, drawn from members of the college.
Who would like to read first? So much depends on whether it's on the balance of gender voices, weights of voices, colours of voices, accents of voices, and so on. So if you don't get asked to read this this year, I was going to say there's always next year, but some of you won't be here next year, will you? No. All right. In your own time, go for it.
The Father's wisdom willed it so. The Son's obedience knew no. Both wills were in one stature.
That's nice.
And as that wisdom had decreed, the Word was now made flesh indeed, and took on him our nature.
Thank you so much. The next question they always ask is, did you bring any Mozart? But we'll forget that. Thank you so much, Ellie. Very good, very good, very good.
There's always going to be a great mix. There'll be something for everyone. So you'll get your traditional carols on the one hand and perhaps some carols you don't know so well on the other.
We're always going to start with Once in Royal David City, and there are other regulars like O Come All Ye Faithful, Hark the Herald Angels Sing.
That wonderful sense of, reaching back, and they're such mighty tunes to sing at that time. And when the entire congregation gets going, of course, it's only sort of spurs you on to want to, sing them even louder.
Then there's a second group which might contain well-known carols like In Dulce Jubilo or Ding Dong Merrily on High, not all of which can be fitted in each year, but a selection of these well-known ones appear in most years, and then there are opportunities for bringing in new material. So it's getting a judicious mixture of those three elements, which I see as my main challenge.
Carols from Kings takes its lead from the Festival of Nine Lessons and Carols, first transmitted on the radio in 1928. But it's a service specially designed for television.
I'm in front of you here.
Right, you're there. I've sung it.
Desperately trying to keep
on we go.
Steady.
Yes, and we had to keep pretty well in step, didn't we?
There are two men who know better than most how it all worked in 1954. 72-year-old Rodney Williams was a chorister back then, and 83-year-old Michael Keel was the undergraduate who held the cross, the crucifer.
That little boy who sang the first verse of Once in Royal David City in 1954 was me. Several of us were trained up to do it in case I lost my voice or had a frog in the throat or something, but fortunately I was all right and I did it.
The director of music in 1954 was Boris Ord.
He had a thick, gravelly bass voice, and he took his tuning fork out and he went Then he went, la, 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 la. He sang the first 3 notes, and then he sort of gave me a sort of nod, sort of now, and I started.
He says that Boris's beat after you came in doesn't bear a great relationship to the timing that of your singing. Is that right? You were right. You were the one who was right, of course.
I've noticed that. I wasn't aware of it at the time.
It's very precious to the choristers Christmas time, and we know they have to be judged entirely on adult standards, but they're young boys at heart.
Oh yeah. We usually play dorm rugby, but we've kind of stopped playing it since I grabbed hold of Rupert's shirt and it ripped.
What happened to me?
Oh, that guy. We're brothers. I'm in year 8 and he's in year 7. And
He claims he's taller than me.
I am taller than you.
Some people say.
I am taller than you.
The
And
grown-ups just say he's taller than me because it's making
no,
fun.
I am taller than you.
He claims.
Wilson. The choristers all board alongside the 420 day boys and girls at King's College School.
28.1.
To join the choir, they had to pass an audition at the age of 7 or 8 before singing as probationers. They take part in services like Carols from King's when Stephen Cleabury thinks they're ready.
When I first sang on the televised Carols from King's, I think I would have been in year 6, so I'd been 10. That was quite scary because we didn't really know how it worked then. I was quite nervous about making a mistake because, I didn't know if that meant it would have to be redone. Yeah, it was quite scary, but it was good fun. When I sing in the choir, sometimes it's just these moments when everything just seems to go away and you're just there, which is an amazing feeling.
The choir has never been better than it is now. It's all relative because they've always been very, very good. It's going through a particularly good period at the moment. They've got some very, very strong boys, and they've got some very talented choral scholar lower parts, and the two have really gelled so well this term.
We all think Mr. Cleabury's amazing. He has a very particular way of doing things in the choir, which we all admire. He's a great musician and a conductor. I'd love to be a conductor when I'm older, so I look up to him like a hero.
I think Stephen has brought the quality of the choir to a higher level than ever before.
Within living memory, there have been 3 people, my 3 immediate predecessors, who've been very strongly associated in the public mind with the choir. It was probably under Boris Ord that the choir first came to wide recognition, because after all, they did their early recordings with him and the television service of 1954. So his was a name very closely associated with the choir, and I think many of the legacies that he left have been followed and built upon by his successors, David Willcocks and the late Philip Ledger, and I have to say that they were the most wonderful predecessors I could hope to have had, because they were always encouraging and always supportive.
The angel Gabriel visits the Blessed Virgin Mary.
My father ran the choir at King's from 1957 through until 1973, when he moved to be director of the Royal College of Music in London. And my father's always, I think, felt that he was just a temporary custodian of such a great tradition.
And the Virgin's name was Mary.
He felt the heart of his job was daily evensong when the whole world wasn't actually watching. Having said that, I think he welcomed the fact that television was able to be beamed all around the world, and so many more people came to understand and to love church music and what King's actually brought to it all, and to get to know the tradition of English church music that he has devoted his life to. As a chorister, I had the complication that my father, David Willcocks, was in charge of the choir. That made me a little bit different from outsider's view. It didn't worry me at all, and my father treated me like any other chorister. In chapel and at school in rehearsals, he called me Willcocks and I called him Sir. And then on the rare occasions when we were both home here, it would be back to Daddy and Johnny again, which sounds artificial, but it didn't seem strange at all. There were quite a few boys of my generation who have made their way in the profession. Roy Goodman, who was a very celebrated violinist and conductor. Bob Chilcott, of course, who's a very celebrated choral composer and conductor. Quite a lot of us wound our way into the profession afterwards.
Johnny was very, very modest chap. He was a big boy, very well built, and so he was bigger than all of us, but he was very gentle. And plus the fact that he was very good, like his father, he was very good at sport. So Johnny hitting a 6 was something to be celebrated, but he actually he dealt incredibly well with being the son of the director of music. We never actually thought about it, to be honest.
Bob Chilcott returned to King's as a choral scholar when Philip Ledger became the choir's new director of music.
Philip Ledger came in the autumn of 73 and he started in January 74. Even though Philip was a student here at King's, he had a different pedigree in the sense that he was working at the Opera Festival with Benjamin Britten, and he was a pianist, a wonderful pianist, and he had a slightly different perspective. And I remember as choral scholars, we were all very, very excited by this.
I think Carols from King's has somehow captured a sense for people that they can take time apart from the busyness of the commercial side of Christmas, all the concerns about buying things, which I fully understand, get caught up in myself, buying things for your family, making sure that all your arrangements in place, etc. But it's important at the same time for people to have an opportunity to step aside from that and to think about ultimate things. And I think somehow this service has caught that formula for people. I think it's a combination of the familiar Christmas story, the traditional carols, and I'd also like to think our practice of trying to inject some more contemporary reflection from time to time in as well.
The birth of Christ is described in this poem by a minstrel who has been sleeping in the stable where Christ is born. His sense of wonder captures the feelings of many at this time of year.
For Carols from King's, we've chosen to introduce secular readings, so we get prose, or most often poetry readings, interspersed with the biblical readings.
I've just had an astounding dream as I lay in the straw. I dreamed a star fell onto the straw beside me and lay blazing. Then when I looked up, I saw a bull come flying through a sky of fire, and on its shoulders a huge silver woman holding the moon. And afterwards there came a donkey.
6 days before Carols from Kings, the BBC machine rolls into town. Since the 60s, the service has always been recorded a few days before Christmas, more recently by over 40 technicians with 8 cameras. The producers and directors work closely with the college to ensure the chapel's unique atmosphere is preserved.
It's very much a partnership. All sorts of people in the college are part of that partnership, and all sorts of people in the BBC are part of that partnership. And actually, we have people on the team, the cameraman, the lighting, the sound people, who have been doing it for a very long time and who come back year after year. And in a sense, last year's recording is this year's rehearsal as well. It has that sort of building quality to it.
When we record the service, which happens between 3 o'clock and 4:30, you can see the light change in the chapel from this bright, slightly cold light. But by the time you reach the last carol, it's dark, intimate, cosy, golden and candlelit. So the choir can read their music. There's a light bulb under the candle and the light comes down. And what the first lighting director and I devised was to put in a ring to raise the candle an inch or so up so that we could have a window here so that light could shine out from the bulb towards their faces. But it means that the light lighting the face is coming from where you expect it. The difference between the 1954 version and what we do now, apart from the colour, of course, is that I remain absolutely baffled as to how they managed to do it at all in 1954 with huge cameras that demanded vast amounts of light, were very heavy. The thing that is marvellous about 1954 is that it exists.
I wasn't really aware of the cameras. I don't remember thinking about them.
I do, because you had things that you called dollies in those days, perhaps you still do, and they seem to be much in evidence during the service, travelling back and front. And a lot of the camera work, as I remember it, was up the side of the walls onto the fan vaulting at the top. And there was a lot of activity from cameras. So you don't remember that so much, but I certainly do.
I suspect we were told not to look at the cameras, and we knew we had to watch Boris, so I think we didn't sort of take any notice of them.
Whether or not the cameras were distracting, it was a further decade before Carols from Kings was televised a second time.
When Carols from Kings was broadcast in 1954, it was, of course, a year after the coronation. Institutional memory here doesn't go back far enough to tell us why it was another 10 years before it was recorded and broadcast again. But I suspect what happened is that the BBC didn't ask, and that then on the 10th anniversary of the original broadcast, they decided it would be a good thing to do so again. And by then, David Willcocks was here, and the then Dean was also very much in favour of television, so I think that's why it happened again in 1964.
It was very, very exciting to be there in those days, because I think it was only 10 years after they'd started doing it, and so it was still very glamorous for us. The cameras in my day were quite different from what they are now. They were big cameras, and we thought they were fantastic. And they had those sort of revolving lenses on the front, with, 3 of them or something like that. And we were always getting the cameraman to try and show us how, when we wanted to look at it, you know. And David was always saying, don't look at the camera, don't look at the camera. It was always that. And of course, we always did. You know, because I've always had big ears. And I thought, gosh, I hope they don't have the camera that side, because my ear will get in the way of the whole screen. It was kind of little boyish things that you thought of, but it was very, very exciting to be there. It was of an era when television, for many of us, was still relatively new, and so it was an exciting time, and for little boys, you know, it was absolutely great. We loved it.
We were incredibly aware when the cameras were there, because there was sometimes a camera in between you and Stephen in your eye shot, but you knew that if you looked into the camera, if you failed and looked into the camera, that they wouldn't use that shot. So it's almost a challenge to see you could get more time on TV if you didn't look in the camera. So I think people did try and avoid looking in the camera.
Three days before the recording, the school and university terms come to an end. But there's no let-up for the choir. The Christmas schedule is packed, with carols from King's, the festival of 9 lessons and carols, and a service on Christmas Day.
Josh, when is the touring? This is the first year I'll be doing a Christmas television thing, because last year my throat was sore just before the TV thing. So this year I'm excited that I'll be able to do the Christmas thing too. Touch wood. Yeah.
When I was in like year 6, listening to Alex doing the solo, I was quite scared for him. It may sound stupid, but like, because it's quite nervous that all 3 million people, however much it is. So yeah, but yeah, it was quite exciting, because I'd never experienced that sort of thing. Yeah, would I like to get it? Don't mind.
With television and radio broadcasts, there are 2 chances to sing the solo.
It's always been kind of, it may sound cheesy, but it's always been one of my dreams to get one of them. The TV's the one that I'm more likely to get. I'm going to be happy for whoever gets picked, because...
Yeah. It doesn't matter, it's just a solo, isn't it? At the end of the day, we're a team, we're a choir, so it makes no difference.
I've done the maximum amount of Christmases that I've managed to do, because I've done one in year 4, 5, 6 and 7.
Well, it's always good at Christmas because you get to sing lots of carols. Because sometimes at Christmas at home, I always find myself, well, not always, but sometimes find myself sort of sitting down wondering what to do next. But here, you've always got something to do next.
Sorry. I like Christmas because it's Christmas and Santa comes.
Yay! Hopefully, Robert, the headmaster, will dress up a bit more realistic as Santa.
Yeah, the last year.
Yeah. He had his beard hanging off.
Santa comes round on the 24th with all the presents, but by then we've already made loads of traps. We put like sellotape all over the doors, and we put like tripwires and like buckets of water. And so yeah, we catch Santa.
Christmas at King's is a family affair. Relatives join the choir for the services and festive meals, but the boys can't go home until their work is done.
Rather bizarrely for the child, the most exciting thing about being a chorister at Christmas is about being in the boarding house on Christmas Eve, because it's so exciting.
On Christmas Day, at 4 o'clock in the morning, the Year 8s go up to the Year 7 dorm and have a pillow fight. Then we might think up a plan of action of what we're going to do, and then go and attack the Year 5s and 6s, and then maybe mates might come up and tell us to go to bed, and then we'll open our presents and then go to bed, maybe. Yeah.
The children love it. For the parent, it's very difficult not having your child in the house on Christmas Eve.
Well, our family Christmas usually has to wait until I get back from the service on Christmas Day. So I know that my two younger brothers can get very excited and quite annoyed when they can't open their presents so early, like we used to.
So, have we put something up?
Yeah, this was fine until James came.
We made the tree. Well, Jamie, Alex, and Tim made the tree. Ta-da! Woo! One art lesson. All of us made this Santa with a nose, and in the inside, it's got like a. Look at his bum.
And my family have to come down every Christmas to pick me up, you know, be there on Christmas Eve and the morning. Rather nice, actually. We all have a dinner laid on for us in the cottage on Christmas Eve, so we can all be together. But yeah, they have to plan their Christmas completely around me, really, which is, you know, I'm very thankful to them for that, but it's, you know, hope they get something out of it as well.
I find it amazing how many people say to me that they're making their mince pies when we're singing on the TV. So they just switch it on, there's the Once from Royal solo, and there they are, stuffing the mince pies and stuffing the turkey, and it's amazing. It's just got to be there in the background. You've just got to have a little whiff of Kings in every household at that special time.
Our oldest son, Tom, started in the choir, first of all, and then Joe, our second son, followed behind him, wanting to do what his big brother had done. And then our youngest son, Jamie, also followed suit.
This is Tom, and he's my brother. He's the organ scholar at the choir, and so he's playing lots and accompanying the choir when I'm singing. And he was a chorister, I think 8 years ago or something. And ever since he started, I really, really wanted to be in the choir. So that's sort of what gave me the inspiration.
It's certainly very uncommon that an organ scholar has a younger brother in the choir.
This person was Gibbons.
Yes, it was. I was not entirely sure, but Emma Clearbury, Stephen's wife, told me that she reckoned that the last time it happened was when Orlando Gibbons was a chorister, and his older brother Edward was the organist. So that's a very long time ago.
Do you know who was conductor then?
Edward Gibbons. He was the organist back in the days in which the organist was, because Mr. Clearbury is the organist and director of music. It sort of stems from an older title, organist, when the organist would direct the choir as well.
How does that work?
Well, he'd often direct from the organ. In Ripon Cathedral, there's a hand that you can operate from the organ loft, which
That's
sort
so
of waves.
cool. That's awesome. I don't think Tom really thought about being a choral scholar when his voice broke, because he was already sort of interested in the idea of being the organ scholar.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, ever since, I think probably since I was about 9, it was an ambition to come back as organ scholar. So
Sadder.
Yeah.
Our job is to act almost like the assistant director of music in a cathedral. So we play for all the services a week, 7 services a week. We go to boys' practices in the morning and help train the probationers, who are the sort of trainee choristers. We rehearse and conduct the choir when Stephen's away, because there's so much work to do and so much organ playing. There are 2 organ scholars at any one time, a junior and a senior. My senior is Doug Tang, who's in his 2nd year, and so we share the playing, hop on and off during services mostly.
What's your favourite carol?
I think it's the Sussex Carol that we're doing this year. It's just incredibly cheerful.
Yeah.
Makes me feel very Christmassy.
Why is it called the Sussex Carol?
Because it's it's a tradition. The tune and the words are traditional, and I suppose they originated in Sussex, I guess.
Cool.
The magic of the Carols from King's broadcasts is that for an enchanted hour and a half, the world seems to stop. And we're in the realm of Christmas where everything is perfect. And there's just a sense of, if only the noise of the politicians and the publicists and all of that would just be stilled, we could have a world just like this.
Frosty wind made moan, and so on.
Do I have a favourite carol? Oh gosh. The question I'm more often asked, I suppose, is do you still like Christmas and do you still like carols? And the answer's a resounding yes. I suppose many of us in the choral world would single out In the Bleak Midwinter Christina Rossetti's lovely text and a choice of 2 beautiful musical settings, Gustav Holst's, but the one that I secretly prefer by Harold Darke, who of course was organist at King's College during World War II.
He was in charge of the King's Choir when I was a chorister. And it is a very, very beautiful piece. And he told us once he got more in royalties from it than anything else. And I think he said he got 3 farthings a copy. We were amazed by that.
My favourite carol probably had to be the Bob Chilcott Shepherd's Carol. It's just beautifully pastoral, and because there's quite a lot of pressure behind the service. It's just one of those carols that just everything just is completely awash and just completely relaxed, and it's glorious. It's great.
For the Christmas Eve Festival of Nine Lessons and Carols, from 1983, I've approached a contemporary composer and asked him or her to write us a new carol. Now, there's nobody more keen on the preservation of the tradition of the carol service than I, but I think it's important that it doesn't become a museum piece and fossilise, and it seemed to me the best way to try to avoid that was to invite a composer to write a new carol. And it's also enabled me to show that our very best composers are willing to write for a church choir in a liturgical context, because I think there's a great danger that church music gets separated off from the mainstream of music, and that bothers me. We haven't tended to do this so much for television, although Bob Chilcott, whose Shepherd's Carol we're doing this year, and also John Rutter, who wrote a beautiful setting of Dormi Jesu, have written for our television service.
The Shepherd's Carol is my mum's favourite carol, and it's certainly up there for me as well. It's beautifully atmospheric, has these beautiful soaring melodies, and just uses the space of the chapel beautifully. And of course, Bob Chilcott, who wrote it, was an ex-chorister, so of course he had an understanding of how to get the best sounds out of the building, and he knew what the choir sounded good in, and it really shows. It's just, heart-rendingly beautiful piece.
It's the day before the recording of Carols from Kings. Time for the final rehearsal.
I'd also like to extend a very warm welcome to a former chorister and choral scholar, Mr. Bob Chilcott, who's sitting just here. We have about 15 minutes now where we can do some top and tailing and just get focused into Christmas after the last couple of days. So I'm just going to go through each thing. It says, for example, 5 plus 1, that you all hold for 5 beats. 2 and 3. Right, thank you. So, boys, did you remember you are the accompaniment in this?
The tradition that I come from and the way that I've sung has completely informed the way I write music. I've never got the sound of King's College Chapel out of my head. And I remember John Rutter, when he talked a while ago about his work, saying the same thing, that the sound of the chapel, which of course his Christmas literature is so immense and so wonderful, but I think there's a sound of the chapel in his music. But and for me, I've never lost that. It's the most informing thing, sonority. It's that sonority, and it's a sonority that kind of echoes in your head. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow. Getting there. Was it the right speed?
It was marvellous speed. Good. I think you've had a few goes at it.
And long last chord.
Yeah, long last chord.
Bit too much second treble. We'll quieten the D down. Yeah.
No, they did a beautiful job.
Good,
it just sounds great.
Yeah. Well, it's just perfectly calculated for this space. It just works so well.
Well, hopefully that was the hope.
the sound of that choir, the sound of that organ, the sound of that chapel are part of the mental furniture of anyone who writes music for choir. It's imprinted in us. And of course, it then is a kind of vision inside your head that comes true. It becomes real. And you slip into rehearsal and sit quietly and only speak when you're spoken to, of course. But you hear the sounds you imagined in your head, sung by the choir of your dreams in the building of your dreams, and there's nothing quite like it.
On the day of the 2013 recording of Carols from Kings, the choral scholars brave the rain to entertain the queuing congregation.
And a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw it, you would even say it glowed.
My family living in the Isle of Man, I don't see them as much as other boys see their families, but they are very proud of me. I know Mum and my sister come over whenever they can, twin sister Jane. Yeah, and when they're over we have a great time into town for lunch and stuff. It's very nice.
I'm Tom's sister, who's a chorister, and yeah, they're singing Christmas song. Yeah.
We don't know, nobody knows who's doing any solos yet. No, so just wait and see.
I love hearing him sing, he's so good, I just love him, yeah.
Very, very sad that it is his last year. It's been an incredible journey. 5 years in the choir, developing, and now the end. Sad.
Each year, when I see the opening sequence of Carols from Kings, I see a very familiar building, one that I've known all my adult life, but it still takes my breath away. And then, with everybody else in the television audience, I enter that building. I hear Once in Royal David City, and then I hear the words of the bidding prayer that draws us all in. And for me, Christmas has started at that point.
Once in Royal David City stood a lonely cattle shed, where a mother laid her baby in a manger for his bed. Mary was that mother maid, Jesus Christ, her little child.
I feel very privileged to sing in the choir. Not many other people get the chance that we do as choristers, so I'm very grateful to be here.
What I think we try to do here in presenting the Christmas story is to do it in a way that brings together the beauty of the architecture of the chapel. The painting by Rubens of the child Jesus and the wise men and Mary his mother, Joseph and so on, which encapsulates so much of the Christmas story. The very special atmosphere that surrounds the service, and to present what I hope is the best of music, old and new, to the highest standard of which we're capable.
I would like to think that we would continue to do carols from Kings into the future, long into the future. I've no doubt that things will change in the very long run in ways that we can't possibly foretell, whether there will be pressure on the schedules, whether in 30, 40 years' time people will want to watch a programme with traditional carols in the way they do now. That I can't tell. But certainly my hope would very much be that they will continue to want to do that.
I think it's very important that the programme keeps on going until I'm beardy and old. And it's amazing to think that we're still wearing the same robes, singing the same music. That sense of reaching back and having something which has remained constant throughout all these years of extreme change is just something really special. It's something I'll remember for the rest of my life, no doubt about it.
I think when I'm older, I will probably keep on watching Carols from Kings with my family. Yeah, it will be quite cool to say, yeah, I was once there doing that. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, it was nice to sing it to Mum and Jane. Didn't expect it, so I was quite shocked.
I didn't expect it either.
You made me cry. I never cry. It's like, thanks so long. No.
Made me cry. Yeah, because unfortunately my husband passed away 2 years ago, so it was for him. So I thought, Tom's dad is with us in spirit, and he'd be very proud of him. Very, very proud.